audiobook to Charlottesville and the Hills That Look Down Upon Her, Monticello. Using the forceful, straightforward language that had made him an asset in the courtroom, Woodward argued that Jim Crow had shallow roots. The policies of proscription, segregation, and disenfranchisement that are often described as the immutable folkways of the South, impervious alike to legislative reform and armed intervention, are of a more recent origin, he told the Virginia audience. And the belief that they are immutable and unchangeable is not supported by history. Marshall and the LDF had declared segregation unconstitutional and un-American. The white historian, then teaching at Johns Hopkins, declared it un-Southern. The older Woodward wanted his book remembered as the historical Bible of the civil rights movement, but the suggested reading list at the back of the first edition suggested something else. It included Harry Ashmore's The Negro and the Schools, Kenneth Clark's Desegregation and Appraisal of the Evidence, an able assessment of recent developments in desegregation, E. Franklin Frazier's The Negro in the United States, Gunnar Myrdal's An American Dilemma, a most helpful synthesis of modern scholarship in the field, and Lee Nichols' The Breakthrough on the Color Front, classics of racial liberal thought during and after World War II. Woodward didn't write the historical Bible of the civil rights movement. He wrote the historical Bible of racial liberalism. Racial liberalism, which dominated racial thought from the onset of the Second World War to the Brown decision, arose as an answer to the crisis of late colonialism that the war had accelerated. Anti-colonial and anti-racist movements surged. Colonial governments fell. Segregation in the United States came under fire as black soldiers and Marines fought for freedom in the Ardennes and on Luzon and returned to conditions of unfreedom in Georgia and Texas. The Soviet Union, armed with stories of the horrors of the American South, cultivated allies in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, limiting the West's access to the natural resources and markets of the decolonizing world. Racial liberals knew that something had to give, and fending off hardline segregationists on the right and materialist anti-racists on the left, refashioned the United States as a liberal anti-racist nation with a theory, if not a consistent practice, of freedom and equality for all. The nation faced, they believed, a difficult but achievable task: to align behavior with belief, conduct with creed, to reform the minds of good but sometimes misinformed white people, to eradicate race prejudice, not to redistribute resources or reckon with white racial dominance, including the theft of indigenous lands and black lives. More than a few scholars have said this before, revealing how a moderate, reformist anti-racism ensured not the downfall but the endurance of white racial rule. Race, the historian Nikhil Singh writes, is a modality of group domination and oppression that requires a story, whether biological, sociological, anthropological, or historical, explaining how and why such practices persist and can be justified. This book is about the stable structure of the stories we tell about race in the United States. Racial liberalism furnished new stories about why black and indigenous people and people of color continued to have less, to live shorter lives, and to face greater violence after World War II, but also something more enduring: the narrative structure, the time measure of a whole assemblage of stories. The first state anti-racism in the United States, racial liberalism urged trust in time, setting the nation's racial gaze forever on the near future. The racial liberals' faith in the clock, in progress, in the moral arc of the universe, thwarted materialist anti-racisms and undercut future movements with the insistence that racism constituted a time-limited crisis to be addressed with time-limited remedies. That narrative structure surfaces in the language of racial liberalism, which taught the nation to see racism, and often race itself, as time-bound and external to the United States. The idea of racism as something to defeat, anti-racism as war, to right anti-racism.